Today we are going to be exploring the unsolved mystery Iceberg. We are on tier 3, and for those who haven't seen the previous episodes, things do get weirder and darker and more unknown the further down the iceberg that we go. So without further ado, grab a drink. My choice today is Lapsang tea, which it's pretty smoky, this one, but you are welcome to join me as we explore the unsolved mystery Iceberg. So up first we have the Grassman. This is a tall bipedal hominid that is thought to stalk the woods of Ohio. It is reportedly very similar to something like Bigfoot, but much more aggressive. Its first modern sighting was in 1978, but the natives of the area spoke of a race of bipedal creatures that they described as ape men, going back as far as the 1700s. They also referred to these as the wild ones of the woods. The Grassman's name partly comes from these hut and nest-like structures that it apparently builds in the woods out of tall grass. There are some theories and questions about whether the Grassman is actually related to other similar creatures like the Sasquatch, Yeti, and Bigfoot, or whether it's its entirely own species. The Grim Reaper of the Grand Canyon. This was a photograph taken in the 1980s of a family's trip to the Grand Canyon. The family was having a great time and they were apparently alone that day, but after they had the photographs processed, they noticed something terrifying in the background of one of the photos. As one of the family members was posing for a photograph on the edge of a drop, behind him in the bushes, the camera catches the image of a tall, pale, bald man in a dark cloak. This one is pretty creepy, and some people think it was evidence of the Grim Reaper waiting to take this man's life. If he just so happened to step out a little further, then he should have. The Hinterk Murders. So to start off on this one, we have to go back 6 months before the murders. This is when strange things started happening on the Hinterk farm. The maid at the time had recently quit, as she said she heard creepy, terrifying noises coming from the attic, but no one believed her. That same year on the farm, they had found an unusual newspaper, which no one in the family or on the farm or in the local neighborhood actually subscribed to. And just days before the murder, the family found footprints in the snow, and when they followed the footprints, it led to a door to their machine room, and the lock on the door was broken. During that night, the father of the home, Andreas Gruber, actually heard footsteps in the attic, but when he went up to search and check the attic, he found nothing. He had apparently told several people in the community about all these things that he noticed and found, but refused help from anyone else on any farm or from the local police. The new maid arrived on March 31st of that year, and late that evening, Andreas, his wife, his daughter Victoria, and his granddaughter were all lured to the family barn and were brutally killed one by one. The killer then made his way into the main house, where he killed the grandson and the newly arrived maid in their bedrooms. The killer likely used a small pickaxe that he found on the farm for the attacks, and there's evidence that he stacked up the bodies that were in the barn and actually lived in the main house for 3 days with the other bodies. For some reason, the killer actually fed the cows during these 3 days, and he finished the entire supply of bread that they had on the farm. The bodies were found 4 days later, and they suspected and interviewed a bunch of people. You had local workers, handymen, people who were in local villages, travelers, merchants, gypsies, and they even investigated a few mysterious figures that were seen in the woods. They even suspected that the father of the 2 children, who was Victoria's dead husband, hadn't actually died in World War II like they thought, and that he had come back for revenge of some sort. There was no compelling evidence for this theory, but they went quite far in their investigation of other people, and sadly they never really came to a solid suspect. The case was closed in 1955, and this wild, eerie story of the killer creeping around their attic was never solved. The Iron Pillar of Delhi was a 7-meter tall iron pillar set up by Chandragupta II in the 4th century Delhi, India. It weighs more than 6 tons, and because of the rust-resistant material and just quality of the build, it has shown hardly any degradation or wear in the 1600 years of its existence, which is impressive. It was thought to have been originally placed outside of the Udayagiri caves and then moved to its current location in the 11th century. The Udayagiri caves in themselves are super fascinating. They contain a whole series of stone carvings and ancient stories, mainly dedicated to the Hindu gods Vishnu and Shiva, and contain some of the oldest surviving Hindu temples and iconography in the whole of India. The pillar has multiple verses and scriptures written on it, from Sanskrit to something called Gupta script. it. And it hasn't really been extensively studied, despite being around for so long. Jason Ellis was a police officer who was killed in Bardstown, 2013, Kentucky. He was on his way home where he stopped to clear the road of some tree branches that were in his path. After he got out of his car, he was then shot to death by an unknown assailant, and then just left there for dead until he was found a little while later. This naturally sparked a huge investigation, but they never really got to the bottom of it. As of today, no one has been charged for his murder, but this incident was part of a series of killings and attacks in Bardstown, which might be connected and might not be connected. Bardstown was a relatively quiet, small, peaceful town, and then within just 10 years there was an unusual amount of killings and attacks and missing persons. Some of them were solved, some of them were not solved. A few of them seem connected as they're between different families, but they could just be a complete coincidence. I can maybe try and cover all of the Bardstown's attacks, murders, and try and make connections between them in a later, maybe hour and a half long video. That's if you guys wanted to see more true crime related stuff, but let me know in a comment below if that sounds like something you would be interested in. Jeff Davis 8 is a reference to the unsolved murders of 8 women found in the swamps and canals in and around Jefferson Davis Parish, Louisiana. This was between 2005 and 2009, and most of the bodies were so far decomposed that actually finding a cause of death for them was extremely difficult. A lot of these victims either knew each other, were connected in some other way, or had similar problems like addiction. Despite this, however, there are multiple suspects for the multiple victims, meaning, at least in the opinion of the law enforcement, this isn't the work of a serial killer. The police investigations regarding these cases was absolutely plagued with mistakes and missteps by the sheriff's department, which led to just a bunch of missing and lost evidence where there really shouldn't have been. And a few of the law enforcement's own witnesses have actually named members of the local law enforcement as suspects in this case. So this one might be crazier and go deeper than we can currently see, but a lot of the details of this case, or cases, has been kept under tight wraps by the local law enforcement. And as of today, these 8 murders are unsolved. Jim Donnelly was a scientist working at the Glenbrook Steel Mill, Auckland, 2004, who went missing under very strange circumstances. He didn't go on a trip anywhere or disappear in the middle of the night. He left his home to go to work, was seen parking up and entering the building, and then heading up to his office, and then was never seen again. A week or two before his disappearance, Jim had been acting kind of strange and suspicious and worried. He had told his wife that he was going to have a meeting or two and would likely be physically and mentally stressed afterwards. This was a bit strange from his wife's perspective, and she never found out who these meetings were with or what they were regarding. A search was started, and during the search, nothing was found except for his hard hat found beside an acid vat in the mill. So naturally you might think he accidentally fell into the acid vat and died. So they drained the acid vat and they found his work ID card, his work tablet, safety glasses, credit card, cash, and a single key. This was his work key, and the full set that he had normally, which included personal stuff like his home keys and his car keys, were never found. All of these items were found in the acid bath, with his hat being found beside it, but the acid bath contained no human remains. This was a very strange case, and in my eyes there are multiple explanations as to what happened. He could have been kidnapped or killed by someone in the mill. He could have decided to do something to himself, which I think that one is a little bit less likely, because you would probably expect his body to turn up somewhere eventually if no one was hiding it. Or he might have just faked his death and ran away for some reason. It could have been for his own benefit, just to get away. It could have been maybe he had gotten into something deeper than he should have done, hence the suspicious meetings, and he was running away to protect his family. And all of the items of Jim's that were dumped in the acid vat were either a cheap attempt at faking his death either by Jim or by someone else, implying that he fell into the acid vat and died there and just completely disintegrated. Or when Jim was killed, his items were taken and thrown into the acid vat to try and clean them of any evidence. But whatever happened to Jim, it's a very strange case that has not yet been solved. John Paul. So I covered this man in an earlier episode in the disappearance of Colleen Wood. He was Colleen's husband, who apparently was with Colleen when she disappeared in the year 2000. There was no body found or enough signs of foul play to warrant an arrest on John Paul, but when police did go to question him, they found that he had disappeared as well. He was actually technically on parole at the time, but had apparently left town on one of his boats. He was known to be an avid sailor and had sailed across the Atlantic on more than one occasion. So where he is right now is probably impossible to say. But by this point he would be in his 80s, so the odds of finding him and bringing anyone to justice is probably slim to none. The Kentucky meat shower. This was a very strange incident in 1876, where, as the name for this one suggests, for several minutes between 11 AM and 12 noon, it rained several chunks of red meat, roughly 2 by 2 inches, in Bath County, Kentucky. There are a few theories for this one, the main one being the vulture theory, which said that a group of vultures were startled, took flight, and then as they were mid-air, regurgitated a bunch of food. This was meat, of course, because they were vultures, and this apparently explains the phenomenon. One funny but kind of gross detail I noticed as I was researching this was that they said that the meat appeared to be beef, but according to the first report at the scene, there were 2 men who tasted it who judged it to be either lamb or deer. Now, why you would taste unidentified meat that had fallen from the sky is beyond me. But this was the 1800s, so I guess it was just a different time. The Killing Stone. In the volcanic mountains of Ness, Japan, there is something called the Seisho Seki, or the Killing Stone, which, according to legends, is a stone which contains the transformed corpse of Tamamo no Mei, a beautiful woman who had been part of a secret plot to kill the Emperor Toba, who had reigned from 1107 to 1123. This woman was apparently discovered and captured, and after being found to be an evil 9-tails vixen, she was trapped in a piece of volcanic rock. It is called the Killing Stone because it constantly releases volcanic and poisonous gases, and has been known to kill several small animals who were found dead around the stone. It was also rumored to kill anyone who touched it. Then, in 2022, the stone was found having been split in 2. This terrified some people, as they believed that the evil spirit of Tamamo no Mei was now free, roaming around and taking lives as she wants. It is said that the stone was later destroyed, exorcised and cleansed by a Buddhist monk, and scattered to all 4 corners of Japan, which has comforted a lot of people, but some believe that the spirit of the vixen is still out there roaming around and looking for her next victim. King Ludwig II was a king who ruled Bavaria from 1864 until his death in 1886. He was dubbed the Mad King, as he was, as some would say, obsessed with extravagant architecture and artistry, and used a huge amount of his own money, even going so far as to take out massive loans to build lavish palaces and castles. His ministers all tried to stop him in these attempts, but they ultimately failed, and so this was used as evidence against him to declare him insane. He was taken into custody and dethroned on the 12th of June 1886, and he and his doctor were found dead the next day under very suspicious circumstances. His death was ruled a suicide because, of course it was, and I guess the doctor just decided to do it with him at the same time. It doesn't make any sense. He went for a stroll with his doctor in the evening, and after not returning, he and his doctor were found in shallow waters up to their chest, and neither of them were alive, which is one hell of a way to choose to go if you're gonna do it to yourself. As I said, it was ruled that he had drowned himself, but there wasn't even any water found in his lungs, so that's kind of impossible. He and his doctor also had head wounds and signs of strangulation, and one theory suggested by a local fisherman said that the 2 men had been getting in the water and were shot dead by unknown and unseen assailants. So however the 2 actually died, I don't think they did it to themselves, whether accidentally or on purpose. His brother was then crowned king, but due to having mental issues was later dethroned as well, with their uncle's son, who was regent at the time, declaring himself king. So this might have been one of the many power-hungry plots by uncles. It's always uncles that we've covered in a few of these entries in the last few episodes. The circumstances on this one are a little unclear as to what actually happened, and partly because it was so long ago, it's kind of unlikely that we will ever discover the truth of what happened that evening. The Cassie is a creature believed to live in Lake Kasaro, Japan. The lake formed in the crater of a volcano, and it's actually the largest lake of its kind in Japan, as well as being the 6th largest overall lake in Japan. This creature, the Cassie, is believed to be between 10 and 20 meters in length, is dark brown with a medium-sized neck, and actually has humps on its back. Its head looks somewhat like a horse, only bigger. It also has silver eyes and 2 giraffe-like horns on top of its head. It is also reported to make strange grunting and clicking noises, which I'm gonna be honest with you is fucking terrifying. One major characteristic of the Cassie is how fast it swims, with several reports saying that it has traversed the water at the speed of a speedboat, which is roughly 70 to 100 miles per hour, which just imagine the giant head of a horse with silver glowing eyes racing towards you at 100 miles an hour, all while making these creepy clicking noises. It was first sighted in 1970, and since then there have been many sightings. There were a few photographs taken of this supposed creature, but the creature itself has never been successfully located or captured. The Kendall phone stalker. In 2007 Washington, a 16-year-old girl named Courtney Kendall began receiving text messages from her friends asking why she had sent them a text just saying the word gay. But Courtney had in fact not sent any texts at all. So who did, and why did her friends and family think that Courtney was sending these? She initially just brushed it off and thought nothing of it, but soon after this, Courtney herself and her friends and family all started receiving threatening phone calls and texts. These were all from Courtney's phone, or at least from her number. These texts were pretty brutal, a lot of them. Threats of killings, murders, forced assaults, stalking, even the killing of their pets. These were coming in seemingly around the clock at all times, so the people affected by this tried to turn their phones off, change their phone numbers, change their contracts, but nothing really worked. People's ringtones would even change on their own, and so they eventually called the police, and actually while they were there explaining everything to the police, the family's phones all turned on at the same time and started calling each other. They installed a security camera, then got a call saying that the caller knew the security camera's code. The mum was cutting limes one day in the kitchen when she got a call from an unidentified person saying that they preferred lemons, which I do agree with them on, as lemons are clearly better. But the phone company said that they had no idea how something like this could happen, and they weren't aware of any technology that would allow someone to do this. This case was never solved, and the texts and calls eventually just died down, but this was a really creepy one nonetheless. L'inconnue de la Seine, or the unknown woman of the Seine, was an unidentified young woman pulled out of the River Seine in Paris in the late 1880s. There were no signs of foul play in her death, and a pathologist at the morgue was apparently so taken aback by her beauty that he apparently felt compelled to take a wax plaster cast of her face, which is pretty creepy. And after this, there were questions raised about whether this was actually the face of a drowning girl, as her expression seemed to be so peaceful and content. And throughout the Bohemian period and areas of Paris, this face was used and displayed quite often, and became a popular symbol of kind of morbid beauty, often being compared to paintings like the Mona Lisa. This is a pretty creepy one, but some say a serene and beautiful one. Regardless, she was never identified, and she remains an eerie or beautiful figure to a lot of people. Lars Maack was a 28-year-old German man who went missing in 2014 in Bulgaria. He was apparently involved in a fight and was acting strange while he was alone in Bulgaria. He called his mum saying that people were trying to kill him, and one day when he was supposed to be flying home to Germany, he went to the airport to consult a doctor and was later seen on security footage running out of the airport in the direction of a nearby forest and was never seen again. He had apparently had a fight in a bar over a football team, and later that night was beaten up by 4 men because of this disagreement. He went to a doctor for his fractured jaw and busted eardrum, and the doctor advised him not to fly out super soon and prescribed him some pills to take for his injuries. So his friends took their prearranged flights back to Germany, and Lars stayed on a little while longer alone in Bulgaria. This is when he called his mum, whispering, saying that people were out to kidnap and kill him and that she should cancel all of his credit cards. There is CCTV footage of him in the hotel in which he was staying, which shows him pacing up and down the hallways, looking out windows, and hiding in elevators at 1 a.m. He called his mum again, saying that the people that were hunting him were getting closer. So when he visited the doctor on the day he was supposed to be flying out, the doctor said he was acting erratic and nervous, but that he was fine to fly. Lars didn't leave the doctor's office, saying that he had serious doubts about the drugs that he was prescribed, and after a while he yelled, "I don't want to die here. I have to get out of here." And he left. He left behind all of his luggage, his wallet, his cell phone, his passport, and was last seen on the CCTV footage running out of the airport and towards this forest. He was often described by people that knew him as fairly normal and nice, and had no history of mental illness or paranoia, but the drug that he was prescribed, cefprozil, does have a rare side effect of delusions, paranoia, and schizophrenia, which may have caused it in Lars. Either that, or it was a plot to drug him and then either kill him or traffic him, which he maybe narrowly avoided or didn't avoid at all. His mother believes that he is still alive out there somewhere, but has perhaps lost his memory, and there have been numerous sightings of him throughout Europe over the years, with him on the side of the road or hitchhiking with long hair and a long beard, but none of these sightings have officially been confirmed to be him, and officially he hasn't been seen since the day he ran out of the airport towards the forest. Leo was the strange disappearance of 37-year-old Miss Leo and her 4-year-old daughter in Taiwan 2008. There's not too much available information for this one, but she was seen going into the Yuanlin Financial Building in Taiwan late at night. According to the building manager, she looked confused and nervous, and both the mother and daughter were wearing red jackets. She went into the elevator and up to the 11th floor, and when they were in the elevator, cameras showed that the mother and daughter both took off their shoes and their red jackets. They then left the elevator on the 11th floor and were never seen again. Extensive searches of the building and the surrounding area were done, as it was initially thought that they had maybe jumped off the building, but the woman and her daughter were never found. There's not too much online about this one, but the mother's identity and bank cards were never used after this, and there are no records of her daughter enrolling in any school, so authorities think that it is unlikely that the pair just ran away. The color red in local culture is apparently known to attract spirits and ghosts, so with the pair taking off their red jackets on the 11th floor, there is apparently now no one living on the 11th floor due to rumors of it being haunted. But the ultimate fate of Miss Liu and her child is still unknown. The Loch Ness Monster is probably one of the most well-known of these Lapras-looking creatures in the world. This creature apparently lives in the Loch Ness, which is basically a large lake in Scotland. It is often known just as Nessie, and has had many sightings since it was first reported in the 6th century. There are many reported creatures of similar sizes living in similar circumstances and environments, some of which I've actually covered in previous videos, such as the Moa Moa, and some that I haven't covered yet, such as Champ, the Ogopogo, and the Alta Mahaha. Some people think they are all hoaxes. Some people think they are members of an ancient species that's maybe even related to or descended from dinosaurs, and that they are the last of their kinds, trapped and secluded in lakes and lochs. Madeleine McCann. So this has got to be one of the most well-known and well-funded searches for a missing person in the last 20 years. On May 3rd, 2007, the McCann family family was on holiday in Portugal, and at around 8 p.m. that evening, parents Kate and Jerry McCann put all of their 3 kids to bed while they went to a restaurant with some friends some 200 feet away from the apartment. They checked on their kids multiple times throughout that night, but when they went to check at 10 p.m., Kate discovered that Madeleine was missing. A massive search was obviously started, but nothing substantial was found. And to this day, there hasn't really been any solid evidence or leads that might explain where Madeleine went. There was actually quite recently a sex offender that was brought forward under suspicion of being connected in some way to Madeleine's disappearance, but as far as I know, nothing really came of that. There have been many theories over the years, with the Portuguese officials actually at one point believing that the parents had accidentally killed Madeleine and had covered it up somehow, acting as if she had been taken. And another theory was that the parents actually sold her into trafficking, which is possibly one of the most evil things that I can think of, to her being kidnapped and killed, or kidnapped and trafficked, or just a whole range of possible brutal outcomes. And after 16 years, it doesn't seem like there will be a positive outcome for this one, but some people still hold out on the hope that Madeleine is still alive out there somewhere. But the exact details of what happened to Madeleine that night are, for now, completely unknown. The Mary Celeste was an American ship found adrift and deserted in the Atlantic 1872 near the Azores Islands. They found the ship damaged and roughed up a little bit, but still in seaworthy condition. Her lifeboat was missing, the last entry in the ship's logs was 10 days ago, and there was still more than enough supplies on board. The cargo of alcohol that she was carrying was still fully there and intact, which made the theories of a pirate attack less likely, if not impossible. And the crew and captain's personal belongings were still all on board and undisturbed. And no one on board, not the captain or any of the crew members, was ever seen again. Theories did range from a pirate attack to a mutiny to simply an accident. But despite all of these theories, there's actually very little evidence for any one of them. One thing I learnt about while researching this one is something called a salvage award. This is a sum of money awarded to salvors, who is just anyone who rescues a ship. This rescue can include crew members and or cargo, and the award payable depends on if the ship or cargo survived. This encourages ships out in the ocean to take a little risk when it comes to saving and salvaging boats or ships that they don't know. The award normally ranges from around 5% to 25% of the estimated value of the salvage, so that's the vessel, cargo, and the people. And on this salvage, the award paid was actually a lot less than usual because the circumstances surrounding it were a little odd and suspicious, and the court officers suspected that there might be either foul play or insurance fraud going on. And as I said, the crew and captain were never found, so what actually became of them is anybody's guess. Mean Girls is a reference to the lost and cancelled DS game that was based on the teen comedy film Mean Girls. This game was apparently planned, made, produced, and published, and was set to be released in Europe on September 11th, 2009, and in the US on April 20th, 2010. But at the last minute, for unknown reasons, both releases were cancelled. No copies, either digital or physical, were ever released. But in 2021, a YouTuber by the name of Ray Mona said that she had come into the possession of one of the games by unknown means and sources, and actually released some footage of gameplay on her channel. There was apparently a massive bug in the game that broke the game after only the first minigame. I just said game a lot, but apparently due to an ongoing legal issue, Ray is unable to release the game to the public. But judging by these screenshots, maybe it's best left unreleased. Melon Heads are these small humanoids with bulbous, some would say melon-shaped heads, said to be found in Ohio, Michigan, and Connecticut. They occasionally emerge from their hiding places to attack and kill people, and apparently are mostly seen in forested areas mountains, hills, and caves. Theories range from them being an ancient humanoid species, to them being creatures of alien origin, to them being descendants of a criminally insane asylum that was burnt down in the 1960s. Apparently, 10 to 20 inmates went missing. They were said to have escaped into the forest, resorting to cannibalism and inbreeding in order to survive. And this led to their descendants being these small, deformed humanoids, stalking the dirt roads and looking for their next victim. MH370 was an international passenger flight, chartered by Malaysian Airlines, that went missing on March 8, 2014. It was flying from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia to Beijing in China, and during its flight just mysteriously went missing. There were many theories about this one, and I remember watching some documentaries about it only last year. The plane last made voice contact only less than an hour after its takeoff. This was while it was over the South China Sea, and then all of the communication and electronics not necessary to actually fly the plane were manually, it seems, turned off. An hour after that, it failed to show up on any radars, and soon after, a search was started. At the start of the search, they searched the areas of the flight path, which kind of makes sense, and they even enrolled the help of some civilians who were able to go online and search through a huge amount of underwater scans to try and see maybe wreckage of the plane, but nothing was really found. After finding nothing, they were quickly running out of options. But the plane was apparently found to be picked up on several pings in West Indonesia, which is like the complete opposite direction of the original flight path. It's a little unclear, but if this was the plane that the pings showed, there would be 3 obvious directions that the plane would have gone after this. They could have turned left towards South Indonesia, right towards maybe Russia or Kazakhstan, or just straight out into the vast Indian Ocean until they ran out of fuel. The plane and its passengers were sadly never found, and theories range from this being an inside job by the pilot, who may or may not have been depressed and wanted to take his own as well as everyone else's life by flying the plane out into the Indian Ocean. This is something, however, that his family strongly disagree with, and they are appalled by these sorts of accusations about him. Another theory was that the plane was shot down by China and then covered up, and one of the last major theories is that the plane was hijacked and then flown to Kazakhstan, an ally of Russia, where whatever happened. This case is a super interesting one if you maybe want to kill some time and watch a documentary or two, but it is an interesting and sad case that we never got to the bottom of. Micro black holes. So black holes are mass or energy that is so concentrated that the escape velocity, which is the speed or velocity that something has to go to escape its orbit, is so high that it exceeds the speed of light, meaning that even light that gets sucked into its orbit can't escape. Therefore, because light isn't able to escape from the black hole, it appears to us as black. And black holes in general are thought to be no smaller than stellar mass, which is roughly the size and mass of a star. But micro or mini black holes are theoretical tiny black holes, potentially smaller than a single atom. These are thought to have formed just after the Big Bang, and these primordial black holes are actually something we covered in a previous episode. If these micro black holes do exist, they would mess with the current general theory of relativity, and actually finding one may force us to come up with many different theories about everything in space, science, and our existence. And that is all we have time for today, guys. I really enjoyed this episode, and I enjoyed this new setup, but honestly, tell me what you think. Is the lighting okay? Is this too bright? Is it too dark in the background? Do you mind the, or even like the colored light on top? We can maybe have a vote on what color you guys would like to see, as there is honestly a huge range of colors on this thing, and some of them look pretty cool, I think. Although they might be a little too intense maybe. But as I said, let me know in the comments below what you guys think. And if you liked the video, then please feel free to like the video, as it really helps me out. And if you would like to stay tuned for the rest of this iceberg, all future icebergs, and any future videos that I do, please do subscribe and hit the notification bell. But with that said, I really enjoyed this episode, and as always guys, thanks for watching.